Welcome to the channel, everybody, and today I want to talk about a few different features that Retro Bowl could implement that could make this game so much better. Retro Bowl is one of my favorite games, and I think there are a few key features that it is missing that could take it up to the next level. Obviously, one of the features that everybody and their mother has been talking about is adding defense. If you do want to see what defense could look like in Retro Bowl, I would highly recommend Retro Sports Radio. He has a great channel where he does awesome stuff like that. QB mode being another feature that's been talked about a ton over the past few months. Clearly a lot of buzz on my channel and other channels soon to follow. If you want to see what QB mode could look like, check out my series on my channel. With Retro Bowl not being a licensed game, there are a few drawbacks that the game has, but obviously if you can spend the dollar to get the unlimited version, it is well worth it, giving you the ability to customize college teams and add any type of flair you want, and you could even rename your Detroit team or your Kansas City team to the Chiefs or the Lions. If you want to follow the most in-depth guide on how to set up college teams in Retro Bowl, I would highly recommend checking out the video above. Obviously, Retro Bowl is not a licensed NFL game, therefore it will not be able to have the real teams, which means it won't be able to have real players, but I have created some mock-ups of what it could look like, showing different stats, players of the week, and league leaders. The first feature that Retro Bowl could add in 2023 is more save slots. Currently, we only have 5 save slots, and if you're like me, I use my 5th save slot for college teams as a template. So technically, I only have 4 working saves. Retro Bowl being one of those games where you love to have different franchises and different experiences, I would love to see this be expanded to 6, 7, even 10, as you see here. Now, obviously, with this mock-up, there's no ability to delete, but all you would do is click on the save, go to your settings, and underneath scan lines, you could easily add a delete save feature. You would click on it, it would bring you back to the screen with all of your slots where the load game would now say delete. And then you never have to worry about accidentally deleting a save. I have done that where you go through the motions, you're being too quick, you click on the X, and now you don't have a save anymore. It would avoid that, it would keep it a little bit safer. I think it could be an easy addition that would add a ton more playability to this game. The first big feature that I think Retro Bowl should add in 2023 is a scouting overhaul. This would start with the ability to scout during the season. Why is it that I can only scout when the draft is literally happening? I should be able to scout in the mid-season, at the end of the season, before re-signings. In fact, the only time I shouldn't be able to scout would be at the draft, when you should already have all of your information readily available. So I think it's a very simple fix as far as UI is concerned. In the roster tab, there is this helmet that allows you to boost your conditioning or morale for your whole team and kind of gives you a numerical overview of your team as a whole. While the overview is nice, I have never used this tab once. I think you click on the helmet and it brings you to a scouting tab, which looks very similar to the draft, where you have different pages of all of the upcoming prospects. And here you have the ability to look through the upcoming talent and scout them. So no more guesswork when it's time to re-sign that old free agent receiver that wants a big contract and you're like, do I give him 31 mil? I guess I'll have to re-sign him. And then you find a great prospect in the second round. Now you know who's going to be coming up, just like in real life. You can prepare better for contract purposes. It adds to the team building experience. It makes it so much easier and so much more realistic. Now notice I said scouting overhaul. I don't want to just stop here. I want to continue to add the depth to the draft. The draft is my favorite part of the NFL, and currently it is just a blip on the radar for Retro Bowl. So with the scouting overhaul, it doesn't just stop at the ability to scout during the season. I'm talking about a dedicated scout. Currently, for your staff, you have offense and defensive coordinators, then you have yourself as a head coach. I would love to slot a scout right next to the head coach. The scout would have different traits, just like offense and defensive coordinators, that could give you a little bit of an edge and add a little bit more depth to each team. Currently, scouting is very simple. You click on the player, you scout them, you are then revealed their overall potential, where they can improve, their conditioning, and their morale. For some reason, there's a question mark on morale, even though if you look at the main screen, you can literally just see their morale before you even scout them, so that's pretty useless in my opinion. I would like to make it a little bit more intricate and a little bit more of a fog of war mechanic. When you scout a player, their conditioning and morale should be revealed to you. However, their potential should also be revealed, but not what they can improve on specifically. For instance, right here, if I scout Brian Ramczyk and see that he's a 3.5-star prospect currently, His potential should be revealed to me as a 4.5 star, but I do not want to be able to see which traits he can improve on. I think it makes it a lot more difficult for scouting as a whole, which is the way it is in real life. You can always project a player and say this guy's got a great ceiling on him, but what can you actually improve on is a little bit more of a question. Clearly, mechanics for a quarterback or the ability to, sure up their hands as a receiver is something that can be worked on. But if you scout all of your receivers just to see if they have the potential for max speed, it kind of takes away from the actual depth and immersion that scouting is supposed to bring. There is supposed to be a little bit of an unknown with scouting, and I think that this would make the game a lot more fun and a little bit less stale overall. This is where coaching traits could come in so clutch for scouts. Currently, for offense and defensive coordinators, there's different traits. You have physio, talent spotter. These give you a little bit more nuance when you're actually building your team, and they give you a little bit more of an edge in certain areas. While the draft has now become a little bit more unknown, your scout traits can become even more important. Maybe your scout is a motivator, and whenever you draft a player, no matter what his traditional morale would have been, it's always exceptional. Think about drafting a receiver that's got poor or bad morale. A couple losses in and he's already toxic. With a trait like motivator, he will always be an exceptional morale no matter who you draft. Since all of your scouted players' attributes are now unknown, I think another great trait for scouting could be the ability to see physical traits for certain prospects. For instance, maybe your scout strictly focuses on athletic freaks. Therefore, when he scouts a player, his potential is revealed to you, and his attribute potential for his speed and strength are also revealed, while keeping something like catching and hidden. Compared to what we have now, I don't think this is that far-fetched, but I think it would make a world of difference for improving the overall playability of Retro Bowl. The draft is literally one of the biggest aspects of team building in the NFL, and I think there needs to be more of an emphasis on how you draft in the first place. Adding this would make the draft feel so much bigger and so much more important, and you would actually have more of a relationship with the players before it's actually time to draft. When you know the prospects that are coming out of the draft, like real NFL teams do, you can coordinate your contracts, and maybe you don't give that guy the contract that he's asking for because you're not feeling so desperate. You know that there's other talent at that same position in the draft. It's not up to chance anymore. The fourth point I want to talk about has probably the biggest impact on the entire game, considering it has kind of a trickle-down effect throughout all of the new features that are added and a lot of the features that are currently in the game. I'm talking about an overhaul to the morale system. Now listen, I love the arcadey morale idea that Retro Bowl has. I don't want to change that at all. However, I feel that there's too many morales, and I feel like the variance needs to be a little bit wider. What I mean by that is instead of having excellent, great, good, fair, poor, bad, toxic, there's way too many names you can have for different morales. I think there needs to be just a few, but make that percentage wider. For instance, instead of exceptional being, the top 5%, make exceptional being 100% morale to 90% morale. Add good morale being 89% morale down to 70%, 69 down to 50 for fair morale, 49% down to 21% for bad morale, and 20% down to 0 for toxic. Now you have a wider range, which means one small meeting with your toxic receiver might not bring him up to the ability to trade him away. I know this has definitely happened to you guys, where there's a player that you want to re-sign, but he's toxic, so you're going to have to let him go. You just meet with him, spend 4 coaching credits, and now next thing you know, he's back on the team. I think that for a wider range of different morales, it's going to make it a lot more of an emphasis on keeping your players happy. Now, one small meeting might not make a big enough difference for your player to decide to stay or leave. If your player's literally at 1 morale, one meeting should not bring him up to 26%, allowing him to re-sign. This is going to add a little bit more of an emphasis to your player's morale during the season. There's no more, well, I know at the very end of the day, I can always just boost him if I need to. I think that the idea that toxic players should get a boost is ridiculous. Granted, I understand the idea that they're angry, so they're going to run harder and throw further, but it's ridiculous that you're going to reward poor team management. I think that if anything, toxic morale should have a negative effect on players' attributes, showing that they're distracted and not focused on the game itself. This is something small, but I would also like to see your morale be able to be affected by going on a win streak or a losing streak. Obviously, each game, whether it's a win or loss, is going to boost everyone's morale, but if your team hits a 5-game win streak or takes the lead in the division, I'd like to see see an overall boost for your entire team's morale. Or if your team just got eliminated from playoff contention, I'd like to see a big hit towards everyone's morale as well. Or if you want to add even more depth to the morale system as a whole, during the week of the trade deadline, if your team is below 500, maybe everyone's morale slightly goes down because they're worried that people might get shipped out. This brings me to my fifth and final point, which is honestly the easiest, most seamless addition to Retroball in my opinion: adding a trade block to the front office tab. Here's a mock-up of what it could look like with the new scout being added as well. I moved the salary underneath the different facilities. I also added a button to be able to increase the salary cap as opposed to having it take up an entire tab. That is where the trade block feature is now going to be added. This is going to behave very similar to the free agency tab, except you can offer different picks for compensation as opposed to coaching credits. I don't want this to be as uniform as free agency as well. I want there to be a lot more variance and make the refresh button actually play a huge role. If you really think about it, what are the odds that there's an available quarterback, running back, tight end, 2 receivers, offensive linemen, all available in the same exact league? I don't see that being realistic. I would like to see 2 quarterbacks, 5 defensive backs, 2 running backs. I want to see more variance, so maybe you do have to refresh. Let's say your quarterback just got injured, you don't have enough coaching credits to sign a free agent, but you do have some trade capital that you could ship out for a backup quarterback. Now trade away a second-round pick, and he's yours. All of these ideas really focus around the best aspect of Retroball where they can improve the most as well, which is team building. More save slots gives you the ability to have more experiences and more teams. Improved scouting gives you the ability to have more depth to building your teams. Adding a scout, adding a trade block, these all add towards the ability to have more depth and customization in your league. Further down the line, I'm sure they could add the ability to value your players as picks, and maybe you could trade away your receiver or running back or defensive back for another player, but currently the idea of trading away picks as opposed to players makes it way less messy and probably a lot easier to implement. I still like all of the expansion of the scenarios, press interviews, and dilemmas. Obviously, continuing to add more of those is going to add way more immersion to the league. I still want to be offered a 35-year-old retiring receiver that's going to help us on that Super Bowl run, or the toxic undrafted kicker that does nothing but tank your team's morale. There's also a couple different cosmetic changes that I think would just make the game's UI look a little bit cleaner. One, remove the shopping cart from every single page and just make it to where when you click on the coaching credits in the top left, it gives you the ability to buy them. This is also a very small addition, but I would suggest changing the Hall of Fame tab on the home page to just League History, and then when you click on it, change the Player Hall of Fame to just Hall of Fame. When you look at a League History tab, it'll have your achievements, it'll have the previous Retroball winners, it'll have your records, and the Player Hall of Fame, which makes more sense to be under History as opposed to just Hall of Fame as a whole. There are also some ideas I have for making training way more in-depth. I don't have mock-ups for them, unfortunately, but a couple different features I could definitely see would be giving emphasis to certain aspects of training. Maybe your quarterback is out for the week. You could do a ground and pound where you get an addition to a running back's attributes, maybe speed and strength, and your offensive line increases in their blocking. But of course, every positive is coupled with a negative, where you could maybe have your receivers have worse catching that week because there wasn't as much of an emphasis on receiving as there was on running. Or maybe your defense focused on the blitz because you're facing an offense with a very high star rating, so every defender gets an increase to speed, but maybe their tackling goes down by 1 because they're too focused on rushing the passer. They're not as focused on wrapping up. These are very small additions, but I feel like it could make each week a little bit more important and kind of stand out. And with the overhaul to morale and the emphasis on different aspects of team building, everything's going to be a little bit more interwoven, and you're going to get so much more depth and replayability out of each franchise. Also, with everything that I could spend coaching credits on, why is increasing the salary cap so expensive? Turn it down to 50. Why am I going to spend 100 coaching credits to upgrade my salary cap by 25 mil when I can completely max out my facilities and stadium with it? Turn it to 50 for the first 25 million, please. Thank you to everybody who's watched to the end. I appreciate it. Also, thank you so much for 5,000 subscribers. Still doing that jersey giveaway. Join the Discord for more details, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.